It was 12:25 a.m. in the middle of the night. Lahore's inner-city bus terminal was almost deserted. A thick blanket of white fog covered the entire area. The air was cold, and somewhere in the distance, a dog could be heard barking. Rahil, a 28-year-old young man, stood by the roadside with an old backpack hanging from his shoulder. His phone was completely dead. The battery had run out. He had only 300 rupees left in his pocket, just enough for a bus ticket to Karachi and perhaps a cup of tea and a light snack. The next morning at 11 a.m., he had a very important interview for a software engineer position at a well-known multinational company. He had already informed his family that he would definitely catch the last bus. Now, however, no buses were in sight. Only an old red bus, covered in dust and mud, stood parked by the roadside. Its paint was peeling in several places, and its windows were coated with grime. On the faded signboard above it, old letters read, Lahore, Karachi Night Express. The driver was an elderly man, around 60 years old, with a long white beard reaching down to his chest. His eyes were deep and swollen, and his face looked worn and exhausted, as if he had not slept for years. He stood outside the bus, smoking a cigarette. Rahil thought, at least it's the last bus. Otherwise, I'll be stuck here all night. He walked over and cautiously asked, Brother, is this bus going to Karachi? The driver slowly nodded. His voice was heavy and faint, as if it were coming from far away. Yes, son, get on. This is the last bus. Rahil handed over the fare. The driver slipped the money into his pocket without even counting it. Rahil stepped inside the bus. The atmosphere inside felt strange. The air smelled of old dust, faded paint, and something else he could not identify. The lights were dim. There were only a few passengers. At the front sat a woman in her 30s, holding her 3-year-old child in her lap. The child was asleep. In the middle sat an old man, alone, constantly clearing his throat. At the very back sat a young man, around 22 or 23 years old, with his head lowered so that his face could not be seen. Rahil took an empty seat near the front, placed his bag beside him, and closed his eyes. Exhaustion quickly overcame him. The bus started moving. Its engine sounded old and heavy. Outside, a deep darkness stretched endlessly. There were no other vehicles, no streetlights, no shops, nothing at all. Only the bus's aging headlights illuminated a small patch of the road ahead. A strange feeling crept over Rahil. The bus seemed to be moving very slowly, yet the trees and fields outside were rushing past at incredible speed, as if the bus were traveling outside the boundaries of time itself. An hour passed. Rahil had fallen into a deep sleep. Rahil opened his eyes and found that the bus was still moving. He looked at the watch strapped to his wrist. It was now 2:10 a.m. outside. Everything was still wrapped in darkness, but the fog had become even thicker. Tiny droplets of moisture were forming on the window glass. Suddenly, a loud scream echoed through the bus. My son, where is he? Oh God, where have you taken my child? Rahil immediately turned around. The woman who had been sitting in the front seat with her child in her lap was now in a state of panic. Her hands were striking the seats around her. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her face had turned pale. The child was gone. The seat beside her was empty. Only a small child's jacket lay there. Rahil hurried over. Sister, what happened? Where's your son? The woman looked at him. Her eyes were bloodshot. He was right here with me. I was holding him in my lap. The bus gave a slight jolt, and then he just disappeared. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. His eyes shimmered strangely in the dim light. In a cold, emotionless voice, he said, Let go of the one who is left, mother. Sit down. Do not make a scene. Rahil was stunned. Brother, stop the bus. The child must still be somewhere inside. The driver smiled faintly. Stopping the bus changes nothing, son. Those who leave never return. A chill ran through Rahil. He looked around the bus. The old man was still sitting in his seat, coughing continuously. With every cough, drops of blood fell from his lips, staining his white shirt with dark red marks. Yet he seemed completely unconcerned, as if nothing unusual was happening. The young man at the back still sat with his head lowered. But now Rahil noticed something horrifying. His neck was bent at an impossible angle, as though it had been broken and twisted to one side. "Brother, are you okay?" Rahil called out. The young man did not answer. He merely tilted his head slightly, almost as if he were laughing. A shiver ran down Rahil's spine. He looked out of the window. Now both sides of the road were lined with ancient graves. Thousands of graves. Some old, some new. Some were open, revealing only deep darkness inside. Wilted flowers and torn burial cloths lay scattered over many of them. A foul smell filled the air, a mixture of burnt flesh and rotting earth. Rahil tried to reassure himself. Maybe this is all a dream. I am exhausted. But his heart was pounding faster and faster. He looked at his hands. They were covered in old dirt, as though he had once dug a grave with them. He tried to wipe the dirt away, but it clung stubbornly to his skin. Suddenly, all the lights inside the bus began flickering. For a few seconds, darkness swallowed everything. When the lights came back on, Rahil noticed something terrifying. The woman was still crying, but now there was a deep wound across her throat that had not been there before. Blood was slowly trickling from it. Rahil turned toward the driver. "Brother, when is the next stop? I need some fresh air." The driver stared into Rahil's eyes through the mirror and replied softly, "There are many stops, Rahil, but no one ever gets off." Rahil froze. How did the driver know his name? He had never told him. The bus was moving even more slowly now. Outside, through the fog, shadowy figures could be seen moving alongside the bus. Tall, dark silhouettes silently keeping pace with it. Rahil reached into his bag and suddenly found an old newspaper clipping he had never seen before. With trembling hands, he unfolded it. Rahil held the old newspaper clipping he had found in his bag. The paper was yellowed with age, torn around the edges, and felt fragile in his hands. As he read the headline under the dim bus lights, his hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Date: June 17th, 2023. Headline: Lahore Karachi Night Express Bus Tragedy. 23 passengers dead, no bodies recovered. The article stated that the bus had been traveling at high speed when the driver lost control. The vehicle overturned on a bridge and burst into flames. Rescue teams arrived the following morning, but inside the bus they found only burned seats, a few bones, and piles of ash. Not a single complete body was recovered from the 23 passengers. According to the police report, the fire had been so intense that almost everything had turned to ash. Rahil's eyes widened in horror. He searched the list of passengers. There it was. The last name on the list was Rahil Sharma. This is a lie. Rahil shouted and threw the newspaper to the floor. But the moment it touched the ground, it burst into flames by itself and crumbled into ash. By now, the atmosphere inside the bus had changed completely. The woman sat silently weeping. A deep wound was visible across her throat, and blood slowly soaked into her sari. Yet she seemed completely unaware of it. Suddenly, the old man spoke. His voice was heavy and rough from constant coughing. I was the original driver of this bus. 3 years ago, the brakes failed. I tried everything I could to save everyone, but the bus fell from the bridge. The fire consumed everything. Stop this, Rahil shouted. Just stop all of this and let me out. The young man at the back suddenly lifted his head and laughed. His neck appeared twisted unnaturally, and his face was horribly burned. His eyes looked empty and lifeless, yet he was still speaking. Let you out? Where'd we let you go? We're all trapped here, Rahil Bhai. We've been trapped for 3 years. You just happened to sleep longer than the rest of us. A sudden wave of pain shot through Rahil's head. Fragments of memory flashed before his eyes. The bus speeding through the night. Him sleeping in his seat. A violent impact. Screams echoing everywhere. Flames spreading rapidly. He had been pinned beneath a seat. Calling for help. The smell of burning. Thick smoke. And then complete darkness. Rahil pressed a hand against his chest. For the first time, he noticed a large wound hidden beneath his shirt. It looked fresh. The scent of blood filled the air. Burn marks began appearing across his clothes. Marks that had not been there moments ago. The driver slowly spoke. Rahil, you have been sleeping on this bus for 3 years. Every night, we bring new souls aboard. Now that you have awakened, the responsibility belongs to you. Rahil ran toward the door. He pulled and pushed with all his strength, trying desperately to force it open. Nothing happened. The door felt as solid as iron. He kicked one of the windows, hoping to shatter it. The glass did not even crack. Instead, a sharp pain shot through his leg as though a bone had broken. Outside, the fog began to thin. Now he could see more clearly. Rows upon rows of graves stretched endlessly along both sides of the road. From some graves, pale hands seemed to be reaching upward. In other places, figures stood silently among the tombstones. Their faces appeared burned. Their clothes were torn. Their eyes looked empty. All of them stretched their arms toward the bus, as though begging. Take us with you. The woman spoke softly to Rahil. My son, he was trapped beneath the bus. I tried to get out and save him. Then the fire reached me too, and now he is lost forever. Tears filled Rahil's eyes. He slowly sank to the floor of the bus. His entire body was trembling. Strange sounds drifted through the night air outside. Distant crying, sorrowful screams, and the echo of someone coughing again and again. The driver looked at Rahil through the rearview mirror. His eyes had become completely white. This is only the beginning. Rahil, the real suffering has yet to come. The bus continued forward at an agonizingly slow pace, as though some unseen force was deliberately preventing it from moving faster, forcing Rahil to witness and feel every moment of the nightmare. Rahil sat trembling on the floor of the bus. His breathing had become rapid. The wound in his chest was throbbing with pain. With every breath, the metallic scent of blood seemed to fill his senses. He looked down at his clothes. Parts of his shirt appeared scorched. Dark stains covered his trousers, and his shoes were caked with dirt, as if he had emerged from a grave. Suddenly, the bus lights flickered and faded until only a dim glow remained. The atmosphere inside felt lifeless. The air was cold and heavy. The old man, who had once been the driver, slowly rose from his seat and approached Rahil. There were dark stains around his mouth. He placed a hand on Rahil's shoulder. It felt ice cold. Rahil, my son, now it is time for you to remember everything. The night from 3 years ago, the very night you fell asleep on this bus. A vivid flashback unfolded before Rahil's eyes. The bus was speeding down the highway. Rahil was asleep in the front seat. The driver looked exhausted, struggling to keep his eyes open. Suddenly, a large truck appeared ahead. The driver hit the brakes, but they failed. A violent collision. The bus plunged from the side of a bridge. Chaos erupted. Rahil's seat overturned, trapping him beneath it. He cried out for help, but his voice was lost among countless other screams. The last thing he remembered was thinking of his mother. Then everything went black. No, Rahil cried. I can't be dead. I have to go home. My mother is waiting for me. The woman looked at him sadly. No one is waiting anymore. Rahil, 3 years have passed. Your mother never even found your body. Every night she prays for your return, but you're trapped here. The young man with the twisted neck stepped forward. His voice sounded strange, as though many voices were speaking at once. We are all trapped here. Some sleep, some remain awake. Every night the driver brings another soul. You woke up after 3 years. Now, it is your turn to bring new passengers. Rahil rushed toward the door with all the strength he had left. He kicked and pounded against it desperately, but it did not move. His hands were scraped and bleeding, leaving marks across the glass that looked unsettling in the dim light. Outside, the scene had become even more terrifying. Through the fog, hundreds of shadowy figures seemed to be walking alongside the bus. Some appeared burned, others injured, and some looked like lost children searching for their mothers. They all stretched out their hands toward the bus and called out, "Take us with you, take us with you." The bus finally came to a complete stop. The driver stood up and slowly approached Rahil. His eyes were entirely white. His long beard swayed slightly as he walked. And then something even stranger happened. His face gradually began to resemble Rahil's own. "Rahil," he said quietly, "now you will become the driver. You will drive this bus. Every night, you will bring new passengers aboard. This is your fate." Rahil tried to back away, but his body would not obey him. His legs refused to move. His strength was fading. His hair began turning white. Lines appeared across his face. His vision grew blurred. The woman spoke one final time through her tears. "Now you will become one of us, forever." The old driver leaned close and whispered into Rahil's ear, "Your real suffering is only beginning." Outside, the voices of the wandering dead grew louder and louder. Inside, the cries of the passengers echoed through the bus. And slowly, helplessly, Rahil felt himself beginning to change. Rahil's body had become completely numb. He sat on the floor of the bus, unable to move his hands or feet. Everything before his eyes was growing blurry. The old driver stood directly in front of him. His long white beard now seemed to be appearing on Rahil's own face. Rahil touched his cheeks. Deep wrinkles had formed on his skin. His hair was turning white. "No, this is just a dream. I'll wake up," Rahil muttered. But even his voice sounded different now, heavy, weak, and old. The driver smiled and took Rahil's hand. His grip felt cold and lifeless. "It is not a dream, Rahil. It is the truth. You died 3 years ago. Now you are part of this bus. We need a new soul every night. This bus never stops. It never reaches its destination." Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind swept through the bus. All the passengers rose to their feet at once. The woman's child was still nowhere to be seen, yet his voice echoed through the bus. "Mom! Mom! Save me!" The old driver began pulling Rahil toward the driver's seat. Rahil tried to resist, but his body was no longer under his control. Something unseen was dragging him forward. The young man with the broken neck stepped closer and whispered into his ear, "Look outside. Your new passenger is waiting." Rahil turned and looked through the windshield. The bus had stopped in a deserted place covered in thick fog. By the roadside stood a young man, about 25 years old, carrying a bag. His face looked tired. For a moment, he looked exactly as Rahil had looked 3 years earlier. The young man raised a hand toward the bus. The driver, now almost transformed into Rahil, slowly opened the door. The moment it opened, an icy wind rushed inside, carrying a strange smell of decay. The young man approached and asked, "Brother, is this bus going to Karachi?" Rahil, now wearing the appearance of the new driver, smiled. His voice sounded exactly like the old driver's. "Yes, son, get on. This is the last bus." The young man stepped aboard and took a seat near the front. Rahil noticed something unsettling. The young man's hands are covered with the same old dirt that had once appeared on Rahil's own hands. Now the transformation was complete. Rahil had become the driver. His eyes had turned pale. His beard had grown long. His body had become old and worn. He sat down behind the steering wheel. His hands settled onto it by themselves. From the seats behind him came a chorus of voices. Some passengers were crying. Some were laughing. Some were screaming. The woman looked toward him and spoke softly. "Now you are our driver. Bring us new souls." Rahil started the engine. The sound felt strangely familiar. The bus began moving forward once again. Outside, countless shadowy figures still walked through the fog beside the road. But now they seemed to regard Rahil with a strange sense of respect. Rahil glanced into the rearview mirror. The new passenger had already fallen asleep. A strange emptiness filled Rahil's heart. Sorrow was gone. Fear was gone. Pain was gone. Only one purpose remained: to bring new souls aboard. The bus continued to gain speed. Outside, endless rows of graves, charred trees, and a vast sea of darkness stretched into the distance. Rahil had now completely become the driver. His hands were firmly wrapped around the steering wheel. His eyes had turned completely white. A long white beard hung down to his chest, and his face looked old and worn. Even when he saw his reflection in the mirror, he felt no surprise. There was no pain left, no fear, no emotion, only an endless emptiness. The bus sped through the darkness. Outside, the fog was so thick that nothing could be seen clearly, yet Rahil somehow knew the road by heart. It was the same route that had been traveled over and over again for the past 3 years. The new soul, the young man, sat in the front seat with his eyes closed, asleep. Dirt clung to his hands, and the same exhaustion that had once been visible on Rahil's face could now be seen on his. The old passengers sitting behind had fallen silent. The woman sat clutching her missing child's jacket against her chest. The old man coughed softly from time to time. The young man with the broken neck sat with his head lowered. All of them had accepted their fate. Rahil glanced at the new passenger through the rearview mirror and spoke softly. His voice now sounded exactly like the old driver's. Let him sleep. When the time comes, he will wake up on his own. The bus accelerated. The scenery outside began to change. The graves disappeared. The burned trees vanished. Now there was only endless darkness stretching on both sides of the road. Occasionally, distant cries, sobs, and strange sounds drifted through the darkness, mixing with the hum of the engine. Suddenly, a strange thought crossed Rahil's mind. He slowed the bus slightly and asked the passengers behind him, "Can we ever leave this place?" The woman, "There is no way out, Rahil. This is the bus of the dead. Once someone boards it, they remain a passenger forever." The young man with a broken neck laughed. His laughter echoed throughout the bus. "You are the driver now. Every night, you must bring another Rahil. New souls, new suffering, new stories." Without warning, the bus came to a stop. Outside was the exact same place where Rahil had first boarded. The Lahore bus terminal, the fog, and a new traveler standing beside the road with a bag in his hand. Rahil opened the door. The stranger looked inside and asked, "Brother, is this bus going to Karachi?" Rahil smiled. It was an empty, lifeless smile. "Yes, son, get on. This is the last bus." The new soul stepped aboard. Rahil started the engine. From the back of the bus, the voices of the old passengers began to rise once more. Some crying, some laughing, some screaming. The bus moved forward again. Rahil looked into the mirror. The new passenger had already fallen asleep. A thin layer of dirt was beginning to appear on his hands. Rahil murmured quietly, "Now you two will sleep for 3 years. Then you will wake up, and one day, you will become the driver." And the bus continued onward, through the darkness, on its endless journey, forever. There was no destination. There was no escape. Only the bus, the passengers, and the endless night.